Hello and welcome once again to Dave and Marlow, Blazers Edge podcast covering the Portland Trail Blazers, or since they are waiting till May 16th to find out who they're going to be for the next decade. We'll cover the NBA, but we'll always bring it back to the Blazers. I'm Dave Deckard here together with Marlow Ferguson, and we are right in the middle of the second round of the NBA playoffs. Fairly entertaining. Marlow, I want to get your impressions right off the bat of the series, if you don't mind. Let's start with Philadelphia and Boston. They are tied 1-1. Philly wins game one thanks to, 45 points or so from James Harden, and no Joel Embiid at all, rocking Boston back on their heels. But then the Sixers get Embiid back, but Boston comes back with a vengeance and wins by 35. And what do you make of that series so far?
I think that's probably been the hardest series to kind of decipher, at this point in time. The Celtics, they come in game one, lose to a team that's missing its MVP, and then you come back and win by 34 with them on the floor. So, and then individually, you look at James Harden, you kind of want to give him some flowers for his 45-point game, and then he follows it up 2 of 13. So it's very tough. I think schematically, I'm kind of interested to see what they do with P.J. Tucker. I feel like Boston's, they've kind of left him in the arena by himself from three-point range. And if he's not going to make threes, I think that's going to be a big thing with that series. And then I guess the last point that I would probably make is just looking at Joel Embiid. I could be wrong, but I look at the statistics. He had the biggest drop-off from postseason, regular season points per game to postseason points per game. And this is 2 straight years in which he's gone from 30 to 20. So just tough. And I think that's going to kind of look bad when you look at his resume. So hopefully he gets that going, and hopefully we get a competitive series from here on out.
So yeah, this series brings up a lot of stuff. Let's start with a big point. Joel Embiid has won the MVP. Do you agree with that? Would he have been your vote?
I'm like 50-50. I think if you were to tell me that Embiid was the MVP, I wouldn't have argued with you. If you had said Jokic was the MVP, wouldn't have argued with you. And Giannis Antetokounmpo too. He was in the conversation. I think I might have went with probably Embiid this year if I had to make a choice. And a lot of that's just based on the fact that he's done it so consistently, anchoring an offense and a defense, which Jokic doesn't do on defense. So you can make a case for either one, but I think I'd go with Embiid there.
Yeah, I mean, I think his middle of the floor play has been really good. Look, modern centers, it seems like there are 2 modes. Increasingly, there are fewer low post centers, of course, but coaches still try to get him to play close to the basket, or they're completely face up and they're way out on the floor. Embiid has embodied that middle zone as well as anybody we've seen in the last 5 or 6 years, at least. Love that. I thought his defense was good this year, too. So I can see how he would win it. Jokic has done a lot of the stuff that he does for years and years now. So it's not like he necessarily got better, but he is great. These awards are fickle. You can see it going to the new player, but as you say, it's there are no wrong answers. Now, James Harden, that's interesting. He has kind of a quiet year by his standards, certainly playing second banana, but then steps up, as you say, for this Jekyll and Hyde performance in game 1 and 2. And I think that this is what people don't understand about aging. It's not like a player will get older and stink, right? A player will simply get older and not be able to do what you're used to them doing every night. And this is the drawback to, for instance, the Trailblazers looking to acquire a player in their, middle 30s. Like, okay, yeah, you are going to get that player, and you're going to have nights where you go, that was the right acquisition. And then you're going to have nights where you go, oh, this is not going to work. The question is, can you absorb something like that? And I think James Harden is a classic example, albeit turned up to 11 because of his skill set and way of playing.
Yeah, Harden's such an interesting kind of character. If you listen to his press conferences, he says stuff like you would think that he's capable of doing that anytime he wants. Like, he can still turn it on the way he did with Houston. And he said, when he averaged 25 or 35, 40, Houston couldn't win. So he changed it up, and now he's a 20 and 10 kind of guy. But it's difficult flipping that switch. You give him credit for that, but I don't know. I'm not sure that what he's saying matches what we see on the court. Sometimes he looks a step slow. That first step doesn't seem as quick. So it's interesting to look at. But when he's on, he's still a top 10 offensive player. But when he's off, it is ugly. So I don't know. It's kind of hard to say, but you're hoping that this is the year that he kind of shakes the monkey off his back and really makes another deep playoff run. So it's gonna be fun to see.
It's a great example, though, of why Kevin Durant and LeBron James are among the greatest of all time, because these guys have defied that, right? I mean, and part of it is their body type. I mean, Durant is so long that his skill is magnified, and LeBron is LeBron, right? But part of it is also that dedication, that reshaping their games to where they're effective and at the top of the league in their mid to late 30s is absolutely amazing. I mean, incredible. Look, you had Kareem Abdul-Jabbar did it. You had Robert Parrish did it in a sense, right? Because he played till he was 40, but his latter years, he was not the same Robert Parrish as he was before. These guys are supreme superstars all through their career. And you have to admire that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what you're saying. And I think that's it's really interesting to look at guards. It's kind of difficult for them to kind of do that, year after year. And I think that's why a lot of people have pause about Damian Lillard. It's just a guy that's 32 years old, and minutes are piling up, accumulating. It's going to be difficult for him to do that. So, yeah, I don't know. Kind of interesting to think about. Guards
are like the running back. Yeah, I mean, they're the first to age, right? But I would put an asterisk on that shooting can extend your life, right? And as Steph Curry is already showing that, I think Dame will too. The thing about Dame is that this year he turned it up and got to the rim and drew fouls a lot. That's the question. As soon as Dame becomes containable on the drive, then I think he gets more into this is a star-ish level shooter who is always dangerous and you have to respect, but no longer one of the supreme superstars.
Yeah, and I'm glad we got a chance to kind of transition back to the Blazers. Just a weird season for him too. Having a career high 3-point rate and a career high free throw rate, like you rarely see things like that, especially for a guard to have played that long. So it's really awesome stuff, and we're fortunate to have a really good NBA with a lot of great players. So it's fun to see.
Yeah, we'll see if he can pull that off again or if he needs to. The other thing, Coach Mazzulla at Boston, there was a little back and forth because Game 1, and I heard people taking people to task for this, and I think it's appropriate. So they lose Game 1, which of course shocks everybody, and automatically Mazzulla is the worst coach in the universe. And people are saying, well, he didn't make adjustments. And all of a sudden, Game 2, the Celtics just blow the Sixers off the court. And Mazzulla's going, can I talk about my adjustments now? And like nobody wants to hear it. And a little backlash against media and analysts being vague and not actually knowing what they're talking about. I can see that. I mean, it's like, look, not every loss is because there was some magic button that you didn't push and you're an ignorant coach who happened to look past it. These guys know a lot. They've forgotten more than the rest of us know. And sometimes players just play and coaches coach actually pretty well. And all the adjustments in the world don't end up working because you know what? It's an actual athletic contest and either side can win.
Yeah, that's well said. I love to see a coach kind of talk their talk, or a player, anybody. When you get a chance to redeem yourself, it's always a good thing. And you look at Game 1, if I recall correctly, they had the highest effective field goal percentage in playoff history for a team to lose a game. So sometimes it's just a matter of you're not getting stops, and some of that's coaching, but some of that's good defense doesn't beat great offense. And in that Game 1, James Harden, Tyrese Maxey, guys like that were hitting very difficult shots that sometimes they just go in this NBA. So I don't understand why they do that to coaches, especially after one game. If he's got a body of work that shows, what he's capable of. I think we as fans, we kind of jump the gun and get a little bit too ambitious when it comes to, our narrations and how we view players and coaches. So shout out to Coach Mazzulla. I like to see that, and hopefully they can keep it going, going forward.
Yeah, I remember about 7-8 years ago, the whole thing was substitution patterns. This coach has terrible substitution patterns. And I never understood what that meant because, few coaches substitute in a strict pattern to begin with. And I think what they meant was, there's a guy on the bench who didn't play much. And I think that guy was better than the guys who actually played because the guys who actually played lost the game and my imaginary player wouldn't have. And I'm going like, Wow. But in real life, if you don't have the ingredients to make a pound cake, you can't just throw in the oregano and make it work.
Yeah, I mean, I've never made a pound cake, but I can see that being the case. Absolutely. I think you're right. You know, if you're a coach, you don't want to be in that situation where you're rigid and predictable with your substitution patterns. And so, you know, you want to try to adjust for matchups and whatnot. He did that in game 2. So, you know, all the credit to him. And it's going to be a chess match. That's one of the best things about the postseason is you get those adjustments and chess matches and how they approach that. So Philadelphia is probably going to have something coming for game 3 where they can kind of combat that.
Well, and also, like, I think you can critique an individual play, but how many games come down to that individual play? Even if it's the last play, there were 100 before it that mattered. Also, if a coach isn't doing things, it's usually because he can't. You know, again, it's like you think you have a magic wand to bring this ideal man-to-man defense off of the bench or whatever, or switch to it. Well, you find out, well, the man-to-man sucks, right? So that's why you're playing zone, because it's worse, or at least not better. Or the classic example with the Blazers, and we're seeing it with Chauncey Billups. Why don't the Blazers run more? And I've said that for years, you know, of course. But we see sometimes, well, they're not running more because when they run, their transition defense actually falls apart, and now they're running up a sand dune, and they're actually slipping farther back than if they just play half-court basketball. Now, I think that's changing now, but I think that was certainly true, for instance, 3 or 4 years ago when we were all on Terry Stotts for doing it. And it's like, there's no magic solution that's as easy to say. You just have to let the games play out.
Yeah, we've had a lot of conversations about that in terms of the Blazers trying to run in transition a little bit more. You know, it's just tough because you solve one problem and then you get 2 more coming right after it. So it's difficult to say what you should do. And we're thinking about specifically Damian Lillard. You know, there's a lot of talk about him not being a player that wants to play at fast pace. You know, he kind of want to drag it out, play a little bit slower pick and roll. So, you know, you got to appeal to your players. And different circumstances they have too. So a lot more goes into it than just making a decision here and there. And you know, we're seeing it here. I've just been enjoying the games, but definitely something to think about.
Well, and it's different too. I mean, the Blazers have room to experiment now, right? I mean, they have zero expectations. If they want to try running more or rebuild that offense, so be it. It's not like they're going to go farther back, or if they did, all it gets them is more ping pong balls. When you are legitimately fighting in Damian Lillard's prime with C.J. McCollum beside him and a lineup that you traded for specifically to get to the conference finals or beyond, you're not going to roll those dice in the same way because you know what? You can't absorb the backward slide. Now, all of a sudden, that takes you from you're hoping like 3rd in the West to 8th in the West, and there's a big difference between those two.
Yeah, and I think with this new regime of the Blazers that we're going to see over the next couple of years, I think it's going to have to be, you know, more fast-paced as opposed to like in a half-court setting. You look at guys like Shaedon Sharpe and whoever if Anfernee Simons is there or whoever they deal to get a player for Anfernee Simons, I think it's definitely going to be more fast-paced, more athletic, things like that. So thinking about that, you know, you're going to have to make the move eventually. So it might make sense to, you know, start putting the work in now to get there. So it'll be something to think about.
Even Jeremy Grant. I mean, when you look at Jeremy Grant, you don't say half-court power forward. You say, well, he can play in the half-court and he's fine. But you know what? You could take advantage of his speed and defense better if you played a little faster. So, all right, let's move to Heat and Knicks. This is one of the only series that hasn't featured blowouts. You have number 8 and number 5 seed tied 1-1. Heat win game 1. Kind of feels like they punched the Knicks in the nose a little bit, kind of shocked them. But then the Knicks came back, made adjustments, won game 2. What have you seen in this series that's interesting?
I think the big thing is that you wish you could donate an ankle, you know, to the star players. You got Jimmy Butler, Jalen Brunson, Julius Randle, all of them dealing with ankle injuries and things like that. But I think the biggest thing for me has been similar to what I thought, you know, all postseason long. You know, you got to give credit to Eric Spoelstra and the Heat for how they've managed to always find a different level when the postseason comes around. And they've adjusted sort of well, even without Jimmy Butler being in the lineup. In game 2, you saw a lot of that zone defense that kind of like what Portland runs. So it worked well. And then I guess my last big takeaway is, you know, how about Josh Hart? You know, you love the analogies with the X's. here the Blazers' X is living pretty nice without Portland. So you love to see it. And I felt like he had a hand in every play in that final 5 minutes. So he's had a great postseason, and you're just hoping that they continue that too.
Yeah, you got a pair of coaches here. I mean, Tom Thibodeau is known for defense, of course, but also for extracting every bit of whatever out of his players, sometimes to their annoyance. And then, of course, you have Eric Spoelstra, who just keeps showing again and again that he is a maestro of adjustments. And this, too, the playoffs are all about adjustments, right? Sure, you get a first-round series where you might blow somebody out, right? But as you get past that, you are literally looking at narrowing down to like 2 or 3 things that are swinging the games. And because of what we just said, that a team's not going to experiment with a cornucopia of stuff. They're going to bring their best 3 things against you until you show you can stop them. And I think Spoelstra is as good as anybody in the league at reading or watching what the opponent is doing and making adjustments to take advantage of it.
Yeah, and it's been a continual thing. Every year we see that, and he deserves all the credit in the world for that. I will say that I think this series could hinge on Jalen Brunson's perimeter shooting. I think when he gets that going again, it's going to be a different story. I think he was 0 for 7 in Game 1 and shot a little bit better in Game 2. But as New York, as they get their perimeter shooting going and Randall gets a little bit healthier, I think we'll see them kind of wrestle away the series. But this is one that I think is going to go, 6 or 7 games and be very physical, very competitive. It'd be a fun one. Definitely a fun one to see.
Have you followed R.J. Barrett much?
A little bit. He's a great young player, but, I think I see some flaws in this game that, he's got to kind of iron out. He's really had a nice stretch over the last couple of months, though, especially like the first quarters of games and really stepping up and playing well. So I'm a fan of his. I think that there's another level we can reach, but he's definitely on the right track.
He is so polarizing. I know people who think he's really good, and I know people who think he's complete fool's gold. And it's interesting for me to watch him. And, of course, the story is probably somewhere in between. But, look, here's a guy, I think, who has a chance to develop into a nice player whom people just kind of overlooked, right? Like, okay, he's at best going to be the 3rd guy on this team. And when he's popping off and doing well, okay, that's an aberration or that's because of the system or situation. If he steps up in this postseason and provides a key role, I think people might have to respect him a little bit more.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And it's kind of easy to forget he's just 22, 23 years old. So he's got a lot of room to grow. And we're going to talk about Simons a little bit. But if you look at the Ringers the trade chart, they basically got Simons and RJ around that same area where they're like both, young up-and-comers that, have some room to grow and continue to help teams out. When it comes to Barrett, I look at his perimeter shooting. I think it's kind of concerning, especially from 3-point range. But, what he does in open floor, what he does around the rim, and just the little strides he's making, I think he's got all-star potential in the next couple of years. But probably a ways away from that, though, at this point in time.
So Jimmy Butler steps up in Game 1, and now you get noise about, like, playoff Jimmy. Do you think that's a thing? I mean, do you think he's really laying in wait for most of the regular season and just cranking it up in the postseason? Or is this like a James Harden thing where, he's old enough to where some games he's going to be on and sometimes he's not?
I think I've seen enough at this point to kind of say that, yeah, playoff Jimmy is a real thing. And you look at the numbers, his numbers continually rise in the postseason. If I recall, I think it's like the biggest rise from a player that averages 20. And look at last year, it went from, 21 all the way up to 27. The big bubble playoff run they had, he played sensationally. So he's a guy that he raises his game when he needs to. And I think a few players kind of fit that criteria, but he's definitely one of those guys that does it. And 35 points on 59% shooting, 3-point shots looking nice defensively. I think that you could have made a case that he was probably the most impactful player of the first round and even so far after that. So they're going to need him back big time. They're going to win this series.
Okay, let's assume the Blazers can trade the same relative package for either. Do you want Jimmy Butler or Draymond Green?
Oh, Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler for sure. I just think he's a better culture fit. I think that's probably where you want to start at. And they're both around the same age. I have to look at the contracts and whatnot, but anytime you have a chance to add a player like Butler, I think you do that. Just because of the pressure he can take off of Lillard, off guys like that. I'm fine with either one, but Jimmy Butler, just what he's able to do. I think if you can put a lineup with, Lillard, Actually, I don't know who you actually give up, but I think if you can get Lillard and Butler on the same team, I think you take that chance.
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to lose one, if not both, of the shooting guards, I'd bet, but that would be interesting. Or, hey, people are saying, I did a Draymond Green piece, and then people are saying, well, what if you could get him on the cheap? And it's like, you think he's giving up $27 million player option next year with the Warriors to sign a mid-level with Portland? I mean, that's not, but yeah, you really want to revolutionize a team, find a way to get them both. Imagine Lillard, Butler, and Green. That would be crazy town. That would be, yeah, I'd pay to see that. All right, so we have the Lakers and Warriors as we move to the West, and the most ballyhooed 6 versus 7 matchup in the history of forever. In fact, I'm not sure it's actually happened that much. But Lakers come out and win game 1, kind of similar to that the Boston Philly series. The Warriors come back and win by almost 30 in game 2. What have you noticed here?
Well, I think so far we've seen the potential of the fireworks that everybody was kind of excited about with LeBron and Curry. Obviously, the second half of game 2 was sort of disappointing and not as exciting, but I got a kick out of seeing Darvin Ham and LeBron James smiling after being down 30 in game 2, and they hit that goal. You want to go and split one in Golden State, so that'll be fun. And I think one thing that I kind of looked at, one thing about the postseason that's sort of fun is that you can run a guy all regular season long, and then all of a sudden he might not be as ideal of a player to play in the postseason, for specific matchups. And with Golden State, I feel like we're going to see that with Kevon Looney. With the way the Lakers play defense, you got Anthony Davis in the paint defending the rim, and now they got JaMychal Green. He's forcing them to come out and just opening up more shots. So I think Golden State didn't really want to attack the rim to start off that series, and they're content to be on the perimeter. So pulling Davis out, I think, is going to be huge to watch. And I think this series is going to go 6 or 7 as well. I'm leaning probably Los Angeles to win that one, but it's been fun so far.
Well, I mean, the difference, yeah, LeBron was a difference, but it's Anthony Davis, right? I mean, he goes from 30 points to 11 points, looks like a absolute Warriors destroyer to almost an afterthought. And this has been the story all year, yeah? What's up with this guy? Is he... he's clearly not the all-time brilliant center that he looked like with the Pelicans. Who is he now?
I think he's still, when he's healthy, a top 10 player. Yeah, but, it's kind of confusing on a night-to-night basis. You don't know what you're going to get. And I like the transition that he made this year, playing more around the rim and not settling for perimeter shots and, maintaining that same defensive focus. But it's kind of hard to see what they're going to get. And I think Golden State, they've got the team and the coaching staff and the schemes in order to, kind of negate what he does. It's going to be interesting to see how they react in game 3. But especially defensively, if he's giving you 11 points on offense and he's out of the paint, it's going to be very tough to see him having that impact that we expect. So I think he's going to bounce back, but it wouldn't surprise me if it takes him a game or 2 to get back in this flow.
So at the trade deadline, one of the names that Blazers fans were hot about was Jared Vanderbilt. What have you thought of him so far in these 2 games?
Jared Vanderbilt's an awesome defender. He's taking on every challenge that comes his way. And you saw it in the first round with John Morant, and now again with Stephen Curry. I think he's playing his role exceptionally well. And, from what I've seen, his 3-point shot hasn't looked terrible, this postseason too. So that's just found money. And I would have been fine with Portland, taking a chance on him too. But the Lakers definitely have a good player there. And I think you can definitely build something with him on defense.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think LeBron is such I don't know how I want to say it. All stars bend gravity to themselves. But LeBron, through his career, has tended to eat fellow front court players. For some reason, he loves to play with stars close to his position, and then somehow they don't perform as well. You have Davis, who I think is up and down. I think Davis would shine more, frankly, on a team without LeBron. If he went back to being the clear number 1 option and the big guy, I don't think LeBron is distracting and allowing space for Davis as much as it's like, well, who is it tonight? It's either or. But I think Vanderbilt is a guy who, having a physical player, a big guy like LeBron to play next to, and LeBron he's pretty good interior defender still. I don't think he's as good on the perimeter as he once was, but allows Vanderbilt, I think, to stay home less, roam around more, and take advantage of his physical gifts. And I think that was just, it's an example. Like, Davis may not be the best fit with LeBron, but I think Vanderbilt is.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I trying to think about some players that you may have been thinking about in terms of playing similar to this position. And Vanderbilt's kind of different. He's not a guy that, commands a lot of shot attempts. And he kind of knows his role. So I think that's a perfect fit for the Lakers at this point in time. One thing that I've kind of noticed about the Lakers this year is that LeBron doesn't necessarily have to go out and get 30 points for him to win games. And that's like the first time that I remember seeing that being the case in the postseason. Every other year he had to be a hero and bail him out of different situations. But now you look at his last 5 games, 23, 22, 22, 15, 22. So he's able to kind of play his role and ease his way into it and be the quarterback and do a lot of different other things. So I know it's got to be a welcome sight for him. And they've got a team that I think you can sustain that with, going long term. Having different guys come in and being the best scorer on that night, per se. So it's kind of interesting to see.
And that's been a long time coming. And LeBron has tried that before and not necessarily had success. And the asterisk there, or the connection there, is to Damian Lillard, who is eventually going to need to do the same thing. And I think he's tried a couple times, not to pull back totally, but to make sure everyone else is involved. And for instance, this year, I think he started the season that way. And you see how it turned out. It's not as easy. It's not just instant. It takes evolution. And it's not just for the player. It literally takes evolution for the team to get used to their superstar not being that crutch. And this is why I get nervous a little bit about the instant trade. Why I say it's got to be a guy who absolutely changes the team all on its own, who is his own explanation. Like, we've talked about Joel Embiid, who's obviously not available anymore. Like, they're going to trade the MVP, right? But, it's got to be a guy that makes you go, okay, I get it. He's shifted the balance just by being here. Because otherwise, if you get a guy who's, for instance, 33, it may take till he's 35 before that comfort level gets there, that second playoff run, right? And is he the same player at 35 that he was at 33?
Yeah, that's a good point, too. And I'm pretty sure Draymond Green is a guy that we're thinking about. We're both thinking about the same player. And he's so used to playing a certain way in Golden State, it'd be different for him to kind of adjust. And there aren't too many different players that I think that kind of fit that mold in terms of players that the Blazers can get that immediately change the culture and change things like that. And it's going to come at a steep price. But in terms of Lillard, yeah, I agree with that too. It's not a coincidence that defensively his best games came in those games where he didn't have to score 30 points or 40 points. So if you can get guys on that team that can take pressure off of him, I think it's going to be huge for him. I don't know what kind of defensive potential he has that he can raise up to at age 32, but yeah, his best defensive games and his best high energy games, I feel like they came when guys like Josh Hart had 15 or guys like Simons had 30. So it's something to think about for sure.
Yeah, I mean, even Jimmy Butler, and I think Jimmy Butler would be half of his own explanation, and I think he'd do some of those Josh Hart things. But again, if it takes 2 years to gel, I believe that Lillard, I mean, if he doesn't have to play as hard as he did this year, I believe that Lillard will last 2 more years. Jimmy Butler, who knows? See, my cats are objecting to that trade too. You can hear them growling. The thing is, LeBron has gotten players younger than he is. And I think that might be semi-important to the Blazers as well, even if it's only by a couple years. I want a guy who's going to be reaching the Lillard stage of his career when the gelling happens, and Lillard is now at the 35. I don't want a guy who's 35 when Lillard's 35, if we can help it. And of course, the ideal would be to get a guy who's 28 or 26 who now fits in with the rest of the roster, who, even if it doesn't work, can stay and can go either way. I mean, there's an argument that Jeremy Grant is one of those players, and which is one of the reasons the Blazers are going to re-sign him. Mikal Bridges, if he were available, would certainly be one of those players, obviously. But if you can't get Kevin Durant or Joel Embiid, that second-level star who's older, you have to be careful of.
Yeah, it's going to be really tough trying to match up Damian Lillard's timeline just that way. Where you're able to, fight into the championship picture, but also avoid leveraging your entire future. So Yeah, I don't know. It's going to be tough, and I kind of hate that, Portland has to pick from players that are over 30 years old and maybe only have 2 or 3 years left for their peaks and whatnot. So that's going to be tough to kind of maneuver. But, at this point in time, it's a difficult position. It's not one you see a lot of teams in, and I don't know. I'm not really sure what to say about it until it happens, but I think, like you said earlier, that draft lottery and what the Blazers get there, I think is going to decide pretty much everything. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, and they'll want to go big, obviously, because that's better trade bait. But look at the change in the narrative just over the last month. I mean, people were talking credibly, and it's not just you and me. I mean, there were whispers surrounding this organization about some really big names. And it seemed optimistic at the time, but we entertained it because, well, who knows in late March, And it looked like some of these teams were slipping. But again, let's start here. Do you really believe Joel Embiid is available or even close to available? At this point, no, you might as well say Jokic is available, right? Do you really think Jimmy Butler is available? I'm not entirely sure. Go ahead.
I would say no. I remember at the start of either this year or last year when they got out to that losing streak, there was some talk about, maybe Miami would be better off kind of pulling the plug. But, after the postseason they've had now and kind of understanding what they're able to do in terms of flipping the switch from the regular season to the postseason, I think with that being the case, it'd be difficult to see Miami parting ways with him. I think you almost got to take it another notch lower and go for some lesser players that aren't all-stars and hope that they can kind of blossom into that. Because it's kind of difficult to see a lot of the star players, being available at this time, realistically.
Yeah, I mean, is Draymond Green available? Probably not for less than a mint. I mean, again, if he opts out of his contract to become a free agent, then the Blazers would have to get him in a sign-and trade because they can't sign him outright, which means convincing him and the Warriors to make that deal, and they'd still have to trade salary away to get him. I mean, he's probably cheaper than the other people under those circumstances, but I don't think, I don't see him. If Golden State advances, especially, they'll probably want to try to keep him in the last year of his deal or get him to sign shorter term. There's not a lot of the Nets show no indication of giving away Mikal Bridges. In fact, that's who they traded Kevin Durant for. So these names are starting to disappear off of your practical list like crazy. This offseason plan just seems farther and farther away the closer we get to it. Anyway, like you say, let's see the lottery. Maybe if they get the number 2 pick, maybe that changes. But we have one more series. And that would be the most interesting one from my point of view. The Nuggets and the Suns, even though it's the only one that's 2-0. Denver wins the first 2 games at home. The first one really convincingly, the second one fairly convincingly. Phoenix got Kevin Durant, midseason trade. You can't get better than that. How do you see this series going? Oh, by the way, I wanted to ask you, let's reverse for a second. Do you think the Lakers or Warriors are going to win that series? Which do you think?
I'm going to go Lakers in 6. I think I'll go Lakers in 6.
Okay, now, how about this one? Denver and Phoenix. What's going on? What do you see?
Oh, this is my favorite series too. A lot of it because I thought Phoenix would be the NBA champion this year. I think that there was a big question surrounding, their depth. And we knew it would be kind of bad, but I didn't think it was going to be this bad. And it's a situation in the playoffs where, your rotation shortens. You go to an 8 or 9 man rotation, and even that's been terrible. Like, let me read to you the point totals from the Suns bench players in Game 2. It was 0-0, 2, 0-0, 0-2. So that's 4 points in a combined 68 minutes, and no double-digit scoring in Game 1. So it just kind of shows you the pros and cons of when you decide to trade for that big star player, and you got to give away all your depth. Like, sometimes it's not always the greatest thing to do. And I think, to even make it even worse, most years, when you play Denver, you can count on, being able to make a run when Nikola Jokic went to the bench. And now that's not the case anymore. So, as Mike Rice would say, this is a team in deep doo-doo. They're in a weird situation. And I'm not sure how they do it with Chris Paul being out in Game 3, too. So that's just adds to the stress of it for them.
Yeah. 2 lessons there for the Blazers. The one, you just mentioned bench depth. And Denver has Jokic. I get it. But Jokic also makes a lot of players around him very good, right? And he has players around him to make good. Phoenix, even after the trade, I wouldn't say Portland's bench is necessarily better than the Suns. And that's after trading for Kevin Durant. I mean, what do the Blazers have off the bench that you really, really trust in? I'm scratching to think of a single name when you factor in injuries and stuff. I mean, Justice Winslow, I think, Matisse Thybulle, sure. But in a playoff series, I'm not going even with them, and they're not totally trustworthy, and they're the best of the bunch. I mean, Cam Reddish, I tried him, Keon Johnson in the playoffs. I'm not buying this. And Denver is showing the importance of that. And the Blazers are already impoverished before they make a superstar trade, supposedly. There's more work to be done. It's not as simple as pressing that one magic button even. The other thing is the midseason trade. And look, I think if Phoenix has another year to run it back, they're going to obviously be better. But they need that run. You need time, like we just said. One of the things that might happen if all these teams with superstars decide to run it back is you have to wait for February for someone to give up on it. And the Blazers have to wait another 4 or 5 months into the season in order to get that deal done. Well, if that happens, I don't think their first playoff run is going to be that great. Do I think they can get to the second round? Sure. Do I think they automatically become a finals team just because they got a star at the trade deadline? I think you look at Phoenix and say, no. So, yeah, I mean, this is, again, I hate to be negative, but from the beginning, we've been skeptical about this. I think you're seeing right now the difference between that solid team and the team that did exactly what the Blazers are trying to do with the best possible example and not succeeding right now.
Yeah, I agree with that. And as far as many teams that you want to model, I think there are also cautionary tales and teams you want to watch. And we're seeing that with Phoenix where, the depth just isn't there. And I think it puts, so much pressure on their star players, particularly Devin Booker and Kevin Durant. Like, they've got to go out and be perfect for them to win games. And, there isn't a player that I feel like is capable of guarding Kevin Durant, but Aaron Gordon, we've got to give a shout out to him. He held Kevin Durant to 3 of 13 shooting in that game too. So Denver's got guys that I think, play their roles, perfectly. And Gordon, he kind of caught my eye a couple years ago during that series with Damian Lillard when they put him on him and kind of slowed him down the perimeter. But it's tough. I don't know how Phoenix is going to be able to figure that part of it out. Just knowing that now you're down your other all-star, Chris Paul, and if Booker and KD don't go for 40 points, I think it's going to be tough for them to win this game. And they've already played so many minutes. So I have Phoenix winning this series, but now I'm kind of leaning toward Denver. I hate to do that in the middle of a series, but it's just hard to imagine a scenario in which, Phoenix matches Denver's firepower, in that situation.
Well, we're going to know tonight when we speak. You'll already know tomorrow when you hear this. But yeah, Game 3 obviously is a huge one. Let's play this game. Let's pretend the Blazers get Jimmy Butler. Okay? Let's, look, it's not Mikal Bridges, but it's as good as you can get of those secondary older stars, right? Okay, so
right.
We agree that's pretty much the ideal of that genre, right? All right, the Blazers get Jimmy Butler. They have to trade away Anfernee Simons and a pick to do it. Let's minimize the cost. Let's just say they get Simons and a pick. Are they better than Denver?
Let's see, if you're running up there with Lillard, Sharp,
Simons or Butler, Grant, and Nurkic for the sake. I mean, you have to trade Nurkic, I think, but let's just keep it. Let's just absolutely minimize the cost entirely. Chalk it all up to draft picks and Anfernee Simons. Are they better than Denver?
I say they're taking them to a 7-game series, if nothing else. If you look at the beginning of this year, they pretty much had the same record. So they were 15-10, stuff like that. So Denver was obviously going to be better in the long haul, but I think they definitely give them a run for their money because now you've got, not only do you have postseason experience, but you've also got length on the perimeter. You've got some different flexibility, switchability. And if you've got some depth on that bench, it's really going to change everything. So I feel very confident rolling out that series or rolling out that team in that series.
So you'd say
I'm not sure
about equal?
Yeah, about equal. I say about equal.
Are they better than Phoenix?
I would say yeah. In the postseason, Phoenix just they can't seem to get out of their own way with injuries and whatnot. So I'd say yeah. I think they give them room for their money too. That's it. Lillard and Butler that's it. Monstrous. 2-man pairing. I'd love to see that.
Are they better than the Lakers?
Ooh. I think this iteration of the Lakers, I think they can match with them too. I don't really see too many teams that they couldn't.
Right, but I'm asking, are they clearly better though?
Clearly, no, I wouldn't say clearly. No, I wouldn't say that.
Are they clearly better than the Warriors?
No. Clearly changed everything for me. I don't think they're clearly better than any of these teams, but competitiveness.
So they can compete. They can get into the room, but they're not walking into that room and taking the dais. They're now one of 5. And maybe more. I mean, because you can ask if the Kings with more experience have gotten better or whatever. But okay, so you make your big move, and again, we posited the minimum cost possible for them. They're going to have to pay more than we said. If nothing else, again, they're going to have to send out more salary. But we just literally kept their entire starting lineup except for Anfernee Simons. All right, so we said that they're a coin flip with the 4 teams that are in the second round here. So you got to coin flip the second round. You've got to coin flip the conference finals, and you got to coin flip the NBA finals. And that's assuming no one else gets appreciably better. I mean, again, perspective. I'm buying this less and less as we go along. But one name that has come up possibly when the Bucks exited the playoffs. Giannis's name was brought up. It was joking, I hope, but people were going, maybe, right? Yeah. So the Bucks fire coach Mike Budenholzer, which brings up a couple conversation topics. The easier one is Giannis ain't going nowhere because you don't fire your coach and trade your superstar at the same time. It just doesn't. If you were going to trade your superstar, you'd keep your coach for continuity. It's like, and they may have fired Budenholzer because of some of Giannis's comments, not directly one-to-one, but there was something not happening there at the end of that Miami series that was like, somebody wasn't guarding someone at the right time and space, and someone didn't feel comfortable speaking up, and et cetera. And now Budenholzer's gone. Forget Giannis for one, but here's the other thing. Budenholzer's a championship coach who's won 70% of his regular season games and 54% of his playoff games. Can you believe he's gone?
It's like 50-50. I can, but I can't. It's really rare that you see a coach that, had that body of work over a 5-year span, get fired. But at the same time, I think if you were to say that you got Giannis Antetokounmpo, you got Drew Holiday, Chris Middleton, Brook Lopez, all of that, and you only get one NBA Finals appearance, I think you can say that you kind of underachieved in that area. Obviously, it's very competitive in that Eastern Conference, but just looking at the bigger picture, I can see a case for them, wanting to move on, especially with some of the late game execution failures they had and just failures to adjust. I think Budenholzer's still a championship level coach, but maybe he isn't the right fit for that specific team in that situation. So, I kind of understand that part.
Nick Nurse in Toronto as well. In fact, I read a graphic that said I think it was 3 or 4 championship coaches were fired 2 years after they won the title. And it's like, wow. Are the expectations for coaching too high? Or is this just like the new thing that coaching is even more short term than it is or has been, and it's a lot harder to move your star players now, so you move your coach?
Yeah, definitely it feels like on a shorter leash, particularly from years past. And that championship rings culture is huge. If you don't get it done, and kind of goes back to Giannis in this press conference about, if it was a success or a failure of the season. It's tough. I don't necessarily agree with all of the parts with Budenholzer being fired. There was a situation with him losing his brother in the middle of a series. So, the human aspect of it, you think about that too. But I don't know. I think, there's so much pressure to win a championship that, if you don't get it done, especially if you have a stacked roster in the right situation, you're looked at as a failure. And I think that them being the number 1 seed, I think played a part in that too, because they're the first ever 1 seed to lose in 5 games in the first round. So that part of it kind of goes into it too. But at the end of the day, I'm kind of 50-50 on it, I would say.
So I think players get to have bad series, and stars get to have lots of them if they want to. I don't think coaches do, honestly. I think that the bar is so high, but I can now hear Blazer fans screaming, well, what about Chauncey Billups? So 2 things. Let's seg into this. First of all, you did our review of Chauncey Billups, and go ahead and let it out, like extend it. How do you feel about how Billups did this year? What do you think should happen with Billups? And do you agree with the cry that, like, okay, literally strike while the iron is hot? Budenholzer is out there. Nick Nurse is out there. Go get him. Fire Chauncey. Where do you land on Chauncey's performance? And do you think that while these coaches are out there that the Blazers should move?
I think, to be brutally honest, I think, you can say that he underperformed this year. I think a lot of people are going to say that. I think, as I said in the review, it was a mutual effort. There were some things that Billups did well. I like the way he challenged his younger players. I like his defensive sets at times and how creative he was. But at the same time, I think it's borderline inexcusable to blow 18 double-digit leads, in the season. I think that's just, at some point, that goes back to the coaching. And kind of like what you said earlier, players are allowed to have bad series, and coaches, you kind of wonder that too. But Billups is in year 2, and you kind of wonder, how different that's going to be with a coach in year 3 as opposed to a player. Is he going to see things differently? But the Blazers, as they're currently constructed, I don't know that they bought themselves a lot of time. If Billups is still trying to learn how to deal with these things and you're trying to maximize Damian Lillard's window, do those things go hand in hand? Or do you have to go get a more experienced championship caliber coach right now? So that'll be something to think about. But I think it was a failure on all parts. And Billups kind of said it himself. He was ready for the season to end, and then they're saying they don't want to see it again. But you don't know what they're going to do differently. So I would say in that area.
Literally what they said at the beginning of this year, right? We're not going to see that again. What do we know for sure about Chauncey Billups as a coach right now after year 2?
I think the biggest thing is that he's a player's coach. In regard that players playing for him, everything you read, I don't think that is just players saying that just to say it. I think they really truly care about him. I think they want to win for him. I think in some ways he's been kind of dealt a bad hand just in terms of the depth that they've had. Could have definitely been better. Like, he could be better himself too, but some situations with their injuries and their lack of second unit hasn't made things easier. Their lack of size has been, we've talked about it week after week on this podcast. They just don't have size, and that limits what he can do defensively. So I think those are the things we know for sure. There's a lot of things we don't know, but the things that we do know are basically that.
Should the Blazers go after a more established coach right now, if that established, let's just say it was Nurse and Budenholzer, and they could talk to them or attract them, should they think about that right now?
I think they should think about it, but I think that, expectations should be tempered. I kind of wonder with Budenholzer, what he did with Milwaukee. I think it'd be kind of, unwise to expect that same thing in Portland, because Portland doesn't have a Giannis. Portland doesn't have a Drew Holiday. They don't have a Brook Lopez rim protector like that. So you're basically expecting those same results, but without the right recipes to do it. So I think if you're content with a 45-win season and a first-round exit, second-round exit, maybe you try that. But, I think it's the situation with the Blazers, I think it's more roster-based as to why they aren't a championship contender right now as opposed to the coach.
Here's an interesting question that came up in the midst of all of this, and it's come up in Boston, a couple other places, and we've talked about it in Portland, particularly in terms of transition defense. How much is it a responsibility of a coach to coach effort? Should effort be expected from the players at all times, and then the coach helps them put that to best advantage? Or is it on coaching to really get them to play hard?
I think, just using my experience as a player, I think that it's more on the players. I think you've got to kind of go out there and want it. And if Billups wasn't putting them in a situation where they, if he wasn't putting them in a situation where they could go out and be aggressive, in transition on defense, that'd be one thing. But with the Blazers, when I watched them play this year, it felt like a lot of times they had guys where they were, foul hunting or trying to get in situations where they could get a whistle and they put him in 4 and 5 situations, and that makes it tougher. I guess on the other side of it, they weren't the best when it came to communicating on defense, and they got lazy in terms of that too. So, like with everything, I think it's a mutual thing, but I think it's more on the players. They've got to kind of want it, and we've seen it when they were healthy that they were able to do that, but just wasn't able to translate over the full 82-game season.
Yeah, I mean, I'm of mixed feelings about that. I think it really is on the players, especially if you're a professional. I mean, this is literally your job. This is the basis of your job, to come out and play hard, right? Try to win games. At the same time, I think there comes a time where you start to process that effort is in vain, that no matter how much effort you put in, this still isn't going to work. And I think the Blazers reached that very quickly after the All-Star break. And I think you saw Damian Lillard scrambling to try to counter that idea and that narrative. And it's like, come on, guys, this is it. Come on, we got to turn it on. Let's go, let's go, let's go. And then you would see them try and see them lose. And then you just saw it start to, I mean, Lillard was like an isolated island in the midst of an onrushing ocean of mediocrity or suckiness. And finally, even he crumbled. I think some of that is coaching. I mean, that there has to be a belief and a confidence that what you do matters and is going to produce results.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think that with a deeper team, I think you can make a case for it. In a lot of situations with, let's say, Greg Popovich, if his team isn't playing well, he'll sub out a whole 5-man unit and put the bench in. With Billups, I don't think you could necessarily do that with how young those guys were, without looking like a fool. So that's one thing to think about. But on the other side, he played those guys so hard, in the first part of the season. You look at the box scores, and Jeremy Grant's getting 39, 40 minutes, Dame's getting 40 minutes. And some of those games, they weren't even winning. So, you're thinking about it, and they may have been fatigued. If you look at Jeremy Grant's numbers post-All-Star break versus pre-All-Star break, it's a huge difference. So, Billups, I think he plays a role in that too, and playing his guys too hard. But, I think it's from top to bottom, the front office to the coaching staff to the players. I think everybody kind of has some blame in that. So, and nobody's absent from that.
And this goes back to the hidden cost of whatever trade they make is, does it cost them depth? Or more accurately, because again, what depth do they have really that's proven? But does it prevent them from then going out and being able to get more depth? For instance, does it push them into the luxury tax or so close to the luxury tax that they don't want to take that step over? And now they're limited in moves 2 and 3 and 4 after they've made move 1. Or does it get them, God forbid, near that second apron where they start to lose resources, right? And are even further limited. There are a lot of moving parts to this that aren't talked about much. And again, it's going to be interesting to see whether they can actually negotiate all of that. It feels like a calculus level problem, and the Blazers are still doing addition. So as we approach that time, one guy I want to talk about is Anfernee Simons as we close, because he is the most named player as far as moving. What kind of value do you think he has, and who do you think might be comparable to him? Because people are using him in trades for, again, Mikal Bridges, in trades for Joel Embiid. He's good. He's got a lot of potential. Actually, I value him, I think, higher than most people do, but I don't think he's in that league. How much value do you think Simons really has?
Yeah, I agree with you. His growth as a 23-year-old has been, incredible. To be a 20-point scorer, dynamite scorer, those kind of players don't grow on trees. But I think that he's a guy that I think if Portland wants to reach their full potential, I think you kind of have to deal him. And I think I've always kind of been on that train. But Shaedon Sharp's finale to the season and just kind of imagining how it could look with Lillard, Sharp, an athletic 3, and finally having some size in there, I think you definitely want to take a chance on that. As far as value goes, I think he's one of those guys where, his contract is kind of new, so you got to think about that. But I mentioned earlier the Ringer, they made a trade chart. They've got him at number 59, and they've got players around him such as Jared Allen, RJ Barrett, Kyle Kuzma, Tyler Hero, guys like that. So I think you're looking at, without a draft pick, I think you're looking at guys that are borderline, all-stars, guys that are capable, quality starters. I think, but when you add that draft pick to it, depending on where it is, you really got a chance to cook with some gas and make some moves. So, like I said before, I think the biggest thing is just going to be what happens in May, on May 16th with that draft pick. If you get a number 1 pick and our number 2 pick, and you can put that with Simons and go get a star, I think that's very appealing. But I think it's going to kind of depend on what we see over the next couple of weeks, though.
Are we still united that if they get number 1, they take Wembanyama? Sorry,
yeah.
I always stumble over that name. They're going to get Giannis and Wemby, and then we're not going to be able to pronounce anything, and we're going to win a title.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you on that. Let's do it.
So they keep him, right?
Yeah. I'd say yeah. Anything else after that? I think you look at trading the pick. I think with Scoot Henderson, I think he's going to be a really good player, and I've seen some comparisons to maybe Derrick Rose, but the last thing Portland needs right now is another guard. So I think if you get the 2 pick, I think you trade that for a quality, wing, big kind of player and see what you can do. But that's just my opinion on it, though.
Okay. Here's my question. Do you still keep Wemby, even if you ascertain that his growth curve is going to take 4 years? And I'm not saying that he's going to take 4 years to produce. He's going to produce at a high level very quickly. But when you're really talking about competing for wings, you have to wait 3 or 4 years for him. And you're not going to be able to wait 3 or 4 years with Dame. So that keeping him means trading Dame. I'm not saying that's reality, but let's say we assess it that way. Would you still keep Wemby then?
That's such a tough hypothetical, because I feel like at that point, you're kind of leveraging your future for your present and your past. Like, I don't know that you want to win Wembanyama, from what I've heard, other than the back injuries and whatnot. He's got a case to be the next generational talent, and I have a hard time giving that up, for a 32-year-old point guard that maybe only has 5 or 6 more years of all-star kind of play. So that'd be tough. But I think in that situation, I'd side toward Wemby, just because we kind of already know what the Blazers' peak is with Damian Lillard as the number 1 guy, but with Wemby, you don't know. And I think that we haven't had enough chances to see the unknown there. So that'd be how I'd say it.
Yeah, I mean, that's my big question. And this is what I keep trying to get at, is that the Blazers fans, I think, have so conflated Damian Lillard and the franchise that they just literally see no difference between the two. And look, well, we got to keep what we have. Well, what do you have? You have Damian Lillard, 100% Damian Lillard. You should celebrate that. And it is everything you dreamed it would be and more if you isolate it down to that player, okay? One of the greatest, if not the greatest players ever to put on the uniform, a reason to go to the arena every night. Brilliant guy. But what do you have now as a franchise? From the franchise perspective, you have 33 wins. You have, having been to the conference finals once and getting swept out of them in 2019 and never coming close. Other than that, I mean, you have, it's like the 1980s with a lot less overall team talent and a lot less forward momentum right now. You're going backwards. As a franchise, you don't have anything to protect right now. Damian Lillard, you have a lot, right? But those two are not the same. So when you get this, well, we got to keep what we have now. You don't have anything now from a franchise point of view, is my argument. And conflating, look, the PR and in some ways Lillard himself have all been slanted toward Dame is the franchise. And I get it if you narrow it down to this one point in time. But this one point in time won't last forever. And you've got to plan for the next 5 years. And you can't, it's literally a kitchen nightmare situation. Well, my current patrons love this dish. It sucks. It's terrible. You're getting it out of a jar. It's just like, or that one dish is good and you're not going to go anywhere with it. You're going to go out of business.
Yeah, you basically said what I was thinking, just a little bit more passionately. I'm 100% on board with that. And I think that we just watched Damian Lillard have the best season of his career, and he had 33 wins to show for it. Like, my question is, how many times do you want to see that same movie play out? Number one. And number two is, does he have another level he can reach, at 33? So if you're asking me 5 years, for a championship contention versus 15 years with Wembanyama, I got to go up to 15. And I think at some point Lillard would kind of understand that, and knowing that Portland did what they could there in that situation. And I don't think he complained about it. I think he either kind of deal with it, or it'd be a situation where they dealt him to a different team to get even younger, which gave him a chance to win a championship. So I think there's win-win scenarios to be had if the Blazers get the number 1 pick. So everything kind of hinges on that, though.
Right. I mean, because now, okay, Cam Reddish doesn't look so bad anymore, right? Matisse Thybulle, even Jeremy Grant, it's like, okay, I get it. We're building into the future with this. And if you, in parentheses, say, and we're going to move Dame, it's going to be really sad. But we're going to get a haul of draft picks and maybe a good young player. Now we've got like 5 chances to add to the future as well. And we've already got our generational superstar, which is the hardest part of that equation to get. I don't see the downside there. I do see the downside potentially of going the other direction. We've talked about it. Now, I'm not going to scream if they go the other direction, especially if they pull it off skillfully. I'm just saying one of those things seems to add up to a lot easier path than the other. But of course, that is dependent on them getting the number 1 overall pick, which we will see. When we talk again, we will be actually 1 week closer, which means we will be on the 12th. They'll hear this on the 13th next week, 3 days away. We'll talk about that and getting all excited and stuff like that. Anything else we need to add before we go?
I can't think of anything else.
All righty. Well, then, for Marlow Ferguson, I'm Dave Deckard. We hope you are having a great weekend, and go not Blazers. Actually, one more thing quickly, Marlow. How sad were you to see the Kings lose?
Oh, man. I wanted that series so badly. I'm not even a Kings fan, but it would have just been cool for them to see. I think every franchise deserves to have that long. I wanted them to feel what Blazers fans felt in 2014. They deserved it, but next year that team is going to be a force to be reckoned with. So better days ahead, I'll say.
Yep. I mean, I was legitimately sad for a minute, but then it's like, okay, I got over it because I'm a Blazers fan, and next year you all can root for my team instead of me rooting for yours. But that was kind of a magical, that was a magical run. I'm sorry it ended soon, but we'll see. All right. Well, for Marlow Ferguson, I'm Dave Deckard. We'll talk about all that and more next week. We'll see you soon.